Hello everyone, thank you for coming. The following speech is based on a 30-page essay I wrote called The Fissure in Gender Stereotypes. In my effort to consolidate the large body of ideas that I have researched and developed, I have summarized some of my most important points. In our postmodern world, which has become increasingly diversified, I find it supremely important that certain cultural stereotypes be re-examined. My core mission is to show the myriad intersections where gender roles and categorizations blend together, which demonstrates that gender stereotypes are not concrete, unchanging truths that have a fixed essence. Once we become aware of the thoughts that construct our identity, we are then free to decide if we want to accept those roles provided by society and culture, or if we want to reject them and define ourselves in our own image. Several questions we need to think about are, what does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? Does gender have an essence? Is our thoughts about gender identity a byproduct of culture? Where does identity originate? At birth in the United States, depending on one's gender, we're immediately assigned a pink or blue blanket. This immediately begins forming our ideas about the world, about who and what we are. In this sense, our pre-chosen blanket symbolizes the comforting illusion of self that the world has planned for us. Many of our beloved airtight ideas about ourselves come from the pre-established footprints of culture, religion, and society. This is one way that we can interpret the quote by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Examining our everyday language is a key step to dismantle false and misleading ideas that are reinforced by the gender stereotypes. Binary stereotypes. For example, the opposite of night implies day. The opposite of yin is yang. In this sense, gender, meaning, is charged into our words female and male to depict a fixed linguistic essence. However, language itself is not fixed. It is a project continually under construction, like self-creation. Depending on the historical and socio-geological context, certain words over time become fossilized and are subject to major dialectical changes. Take, for example, the word bad, which is a popular colloquial in American society, which now connotes the meaning of good. It is crucial to understand how stereotypical structures are woven deep into the fabric of our ideas about language. As Simone de Beauvoir stated, recognizing women means recognizing how they are placed in a sentence. As an example, building on Beauvoir, let's deconstruct the word manager and management, both beginning with the word man. This creates the understanding that only men are worthy of a position of power, i.e. power equals manhood. Contextualizing the Bible and religion, God is referred to as man. We associate power and influence with the beingness of manhood. Think about the other capitalized pronouns, such as he, him, and his. This is precisely because we see God as the strongest, the mightiest, and the most powerful of all beings, per the Islam Judeo-Christian viewpoint. These cultural constructions are empowered by our usage and acceptance of them. Many of our ideas about male and female derive from our social practices and discussions of them. As Ludwig Wittgenstein stated, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. It is easy to see how humans are the catalysts that inject their own cultural ideological commentary into their ideas about gender identity, effectively creating a social construct which becomes accepted, practiced, and embraced as true by members of a society. However, this creates a vulnerability, an opportunity for our ideologies to override our personal health and well-being. For instance, there was a time in Ireland, per Catholic dogma, where women were taught that the body was dirty and that using the restroom was an almost sinful activity. As a consequence, women were taught to hate their bodies. This is the prime example of cultural ideology suppressing biological function, transforming the way women acted towards themselves because they felt wrong about engaging in their normal biological functions. One key distinction is that our brains do not come pre-stocked with an inventory of thoughts. As there are no definitive, concrete, proven, or universal links between biology and ideology, the bridge between the two are linked by supposition. Although this does not omit that we have certain genetic predispositions and inclinations. As Nicholson and Whedon assert, quote, sex and gender are social and cultural constructions that are not reducible to biology, end quote. Specifically, biology describes our physiological nature, referring to the science of the body, based on sound physical laws, whereas ideology indicates the web of our thoughts about our personal beliefs and opinions, a product of subjectivity and acculturation. Discussing the arbitrary nature of social practice and gender assignment brings forth the fact that meaning changes with historical context. Showing that history is segmented allows us to reconsider many of the ideas that we have venerated about immutable gender identities, as certain periods of history are disjunctive, disconnected, where different eras spawn different ideas about what constitutes truth and reality. Prior to Sigmund Freud's contributions, there was the deeply rooted stereotype that men were supposed to bottle up their emotions. A clear example of this occurred after World War II, when men were seeking to integrate back into society. The predominant male stereotype of the time prevented them from talking about their emotions and the horrors of war that they witnessed. However, Freud's work on the unconscious began to overturn the male gender stereotype as his novel ideas began to seed into social consciousness. A new gender stereotype began to grip society, that it was healthy to explore one's emotions as a male and talk about taboo thoughts and experiences. To subscribe to the stereotype that a man is a woman based on the fact that men cry is to commit a reductio ad absurdum argument, which not only confuses the natural science of human physiology with the cultural construct, it also makes it seem unreasonable and absurd for men to cry and experience their emotions. Similarly, if a woman defined biologically personifies the male stereotypes of authority and aggressiveness, it does not change her physical characteristics, i.e. make her a male. Rather, it is solely a manifestation of her thoughts and emotion, how she represents herself through language and social conditioning. Yet that does not mean it touches on the absolute trait of the biological definition of female. In other words, her biological gender does not change based on how she expresses herself. The wide spectrum of our emotions is not unique to male or females. It's a shared experience shared by all humans. This clarifies the point that ideology and biology do not form absolute truths, although they are often artificially merged together to form a fixed foundationalist universal. This brings to light the thought-provoking question. How do ideas and identities preserve themselves through time? To paraphrase Chris Barker, a cultural theorist, suggests that temporary stabilizations of arbitrary closures of meaning are at the heart of how we think about identity, gender stereotypes, and concepts of selfhood, closed systems of meaning, rather than as hermeneutic, pluralistic, and malleable. The important thing is that these temporary stabilizations of meaning arise in discourse, our language about them. In the United States, we have female boxers who are stronger than many men in the ring, yet who also exhibit many feminine traits outside the sport and even appear in many fashion magazines. For instance, Ronda Rousey, a famous American UFC fighter, actress, and model. she portrays multiple male and female qualities, thereby dissolving the gender stereotype divide. She's a symbol for self-expression and gender freedom. A prime example that runs in perfect contrast with the patriarchal culture of today's stereotypical male is King Louis XIV. As King of France, in the 1500s, he represented the height of male fashion and the ultimate definition of manhood. He was considered manly because of his political power, his social status, wealth, and divine blood. And every man who wanted prestige and social recognition sought to dress like him and emulate him. However, by contemporary standards, he had many female qualities. His feminine characteristics parallel today's viewpoint of a woman by the nature of his high heels, his long curly wig, his tights, lacy delicate clothes, facial blush, and sorority-like stances. In the 1500s, this is what passed for a selfie. These traits, through the eyes of today's gender binary, would classify him as a woman, but his underlying biology appears to speak a different story. As illustrated by Ronda Rousey and King Louis XIV, history changes with culture, and culture changes with history. This means that our ideas about the world emerge based on how culture represents itself, how culture produces thinking, and how this thinking is exercised by people, like an intellectual ecosystem that is self-sustaining. When we realize that the color of truth is gray, and that there are many ways to interpret and understand life, we begin the process of understanding ourselves. We begin to understand that the nature of the gender divide is tainted by the fallacy of a false dilemma, which suggests that there's only two ways to perceive an idea or reality when there are actually many more possibilities. Seeking to be an individual means understanding that our thoughts are genuinely ours because we have personally chosen them, or whether we have accepted them unconsciously as social and cultural constructs because that is how we have been taught to think. If we do not think critically, we oppress ourselves.